All right, good morning, everybody, or afternoon, depending on what part of the country you might be in. We're going live here on the Amazon and over on other places. So thanks for everybody for joining us live. If you're watching this in the future, appreciate the follows and the hearts or the thumbs. And let's get into it. We're going to be taking a look at some things that we've used, our friends have used for homeschooling, for some fun gear, and let's take a look. So we're going to start off with a pretty cool. A lot of this it would be considered like STEM stuff or just science stuff, and it's going to be different levels depending on the learning level that the people are at. So this first one is it's a game, but it's also technology. So there's a couple of different ways to get this set. We've got it highlighted here with a set that comes. It's a different set than this one. It's the larger set that comes with the software. This was back when the software was separate, so you could get just the set. But essentially, this Bloxels is a grid with these dots, and underneath the grid, you've got all kinds of dots, and it's pixels. They're just little cubes of color, and you arrange these things. You take your phone and take a picture of the blocks, right? And then use the app. You can animate, you can make your own game. There's a lot of stuff here from design to understanding content creation to understanding timelines and digitizing images down. Lots and lots of stuff here. Really interesting game, and a lot of positive feedback on this one. We're gonna put stuff. Move it over here. We put stuff on the dog cage. Next thing coming out will be another activity. This one's a little less structured, and it's a little more interesting depending on what you got going on. But this is from Learning Resources, a giant, and I mean giant, 4 foot long, 4 foot tall skeleton, and it's designed to be put out on the floor. So you can see the pieces are a real heavy foam, so easy, decent, nothing's going to break here. The pieces go together pretty easily, so no matter what the age level, the assembly won't be too difficult. And as I think you can see from the scale here, once you get this thing together, it's a great introduction to anatomy. There's some resource as far as the different portions. It's not necessarily every bone, it's for kids, but it is a great introduction to the skeleton, to anatomy, and then it's an activity. I think another nice thing, since we're about to get to Halloween here, I guess depending on when you're watching this, is it could double as a Halloween decoration as well. It comes in a box, and you can put it back together, bring it out when necessary, and pass it along. I think a lot of these STEM things, they're appropriate for a certain age, and then you move them along, right? So next up is a really cool set that of skulls. So you can get these from Tube, the series, and a bunch of different types of things, different kind of skulls, but also different kind of things. This particular one has a cool globe at the top here, and once you open it up, you get cool packaging of a whole bunch of, these are animal skulls. So they do make, I think, some dinosaur ones also, and they have just some other things as well besides skulls. I'll just pull a couple out of here. But you can see the coloring is great, the detail is elaborate, and they're kind of a soft rubber. So no worries about these being too brittle, or they're not going to break. I think one of the concepts of these is to bury them in sand and to kind of learn, play around with archaeology and discovering stuff. So these can lend themselves to that kind of play. Or sitting on a shelf because they are very highly detailed. Let's see if I can remember everything. You get a dolphin, gorilla, giraffe, zebra, elephant. I think that's a lion, a hippopotamus, and a rhinoceros. So some epic skulls. And again, these things kind of look cool just sitting on the desk. And they're not really big, so you can have a couple of them as accents. All right, next up is another kind of definitely a learning tool. And depending on what age somebody's at, these blocks, I think a lot of us will remember these from school. You get singles, whole bunches of them. You get strips of 10, flats of 100, and then this block I'm not going to pull out of whatever that is, 1,000. So these things are pretty neat for learning. And once you're to a point where everybody's got the concepts down, multiplication, math, then you can move these along as well. They come in this nice Tupperware, easy to store. I think those are pretty awesome. But along those lines, once somebody gets a little bit older, same kind of concept. You've got, you get into the chemistry and modeling compounds, elements, organic compounds. So they come with these different bonds and different types of electrons, depending on how many, what kind of electron you've got. Some, like hydrogen, just have one hole. Others have lots of them. So once you get you figure out your compounds and you put some time into it, you can create elaborate ones like this one. And this set here is the general and organic chemistry. That's the one we got linked here, but there's lots of different sets. And depending on how many molecules you might want to have or what kind of things you might want to make, there's different sets to help you out with that. I'll just leave that there because it's so cool. Oh, you know what? One of the things I forgot to put in the list is one of these crystal sets. So if you haven't done a crystal growing project, I forgot to put that one in the list, but that's kind of a bonus one, I guess. All right, so the next thing we'll talk about is kind of a mix between a puzzle, a game, and learning. So I don't know, we've done, at least when I was growing up, we did a lot of learning with water and hoses to learn gravity and flow, but to learn logic and patterns and choices and stuff, these mazes are pretty neat. So these are three-dimensional mazes that use a couple of 3 different cubes, and the cubes attach to each other in different ways. So kind of like Legos or kind of like building blocks, but the other layer to that is that there's ball bearings in here. And each of these cubes, there's 1 of 3 different styles for each color. There's 3 different colors, and there's a whole bunch of these balls, or ball bearings. So depending on how you want to play or learn with these, you can learn anything from just like structural stuff, using the ball bearings as just fun, like a ball bearing run or something. Or you can actually create these as logic gates and create physical logic, and lots of potential here for learning. Now our set here is a regular set. They do make sets that have lights in them. And again, for learning logic and learning, understanding the way that the paths of would go in a circuit, having the light up one might be another option. I didn't link it here, but there are others if you end up checking these out. All right, so again, trying to cover a lot of stuff here, but it's not all organic chemistry and logic gates. There's also, once in a while, you want to learn about biology, and every once in a while, you want to have some fun. So this is one of my favorite in the STEM pile of stuff that we've got here, and that's this amoeba. It's very cool. You can get lots of different colors, lots of different diseases and things. I don't know if we have them linked separately, but this is chicken pox. And if you ever look at a chicken pox under a microscope, this is actually pretty dead accurate. And this one is the common cold. Got a couple other examples here, but these are called giant, what are they called? Giant microbes. And they make them for lots of different diseases and issues that people might have. So if you've got somebody who's fighting or fought a disease, if you've got somebody that's struggling, or if you just got somebody who's learning medical or chemistry and struggling, then these are the kind of things that you can throw across the room. You can squeeze, you can cherish, or you can, again, squeeze them and throw them if you need to relieve some stress. So these are the, I think we have a couple of them linked here, but depending on how you buy them, you can buy them individual, like the amoeba came individual, the cold came in a set with like 6 others. You got to be careful that little puppies don't grab these because they don't know that they're not play toys. All right, we'll leave the amoeba out here and we'll move the other stuff out of the way. Next thing, and feel free to leave some comments out here. Mike is asking about the co-host. I just didn't have room on the table. Maybe when I move some stuff, the little co-host can come back. But trust me, as soon as I brought out the amoeba, he's a big fan of the amoeba because I like to play with it, and he don't like it. He's jealous, and he thinks it's his toy, so he is paying attention right now. All right, we're going to another game / opportunity to learn some logic and programming, and I'm a big fan of this stuff. If kids are going to want to play video games anyway, then why not teach them how to build video games? If they're going to want to play, then teach them some logic, teach them some coding. It all falls together. It's all pretty fundamental. We learn our language that way. So let's use our resources to learn or to teach logical thought that way. So this is a pretty simple game. As you can see, it's a cards and tokens. There's a board in here as well. I guess I must have knocked this thing over and knocked everything around. But as you can see, it's there's a lot of materials in here, and that's because it's giving you a lot of boost or a lot of bang for your buck. A lot of stuff getting taught here, and it's fun. So essentially, it is a game of teaching little turtles to look for the little gems. And this was a Kickstarter project, and again, another STEM type of game that is for the youngins. However, there's always something to be said for older kids teaching younger kids this stuff. So even if it's made for young kids, you might have a chance for everybody to have fun with something like that and maybe even learn a little bit. Another one that I thought was pretty cool for the periodic table of the elements is this is a puzzle. So making a puzzle is making a puzzle, but instead of just being a picture or anything, again, kind of getting towards the idea of having fun with learning, you put this puzzle together, and what you're left with is a periodic table of the elements. Each of the pieces is in actual size will be this big. So it's certainly big enough to read and understand what's going on there. And if we take a look on the box here, you can see that each of the elements not only has the typical stuff that you'd have in the periodic table, but it also has like a illustrated example of something that we make or use with that material to get that reinforce, what these things are and what the stuff we use every day is made out of. I think this is a cool one because it's a puzzle. So as you're building it, you're going to have like kind of intimate opportunity to see some of these, because each one of these is a few puzzle pieces. As you can see, almost 9 puzzle pieces per element. So there's going to be some time invested just figuring it all out. And part of learning the periodic elements is understanding the relationships to each other. So I think there's some real value in a puzzle there. But then the end result is a massive poster, right? A massive wall covering that has this info. So while you're studying or for a classroom or something, I think this might be a great addition. And one of my favorite things about it, made in the USA. So very cool puzzle, periodic table of the elements. Moving on to a more, I guess, creative option, and that are these dice within dice. And you can get these in lots of different quantities. I think we linked to like the 24 or the 50 set, and you get a bunch of these, and it's a little tiny dice, little tiny 6-sided dice inside of a larger clear 6-sided dice. And usually they come in 5 or 6 colors. There's 4 here. And the idea is that you can play all kinds of games with these. You can do all kinds of math challenges and lots of different things. So of course, if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons or some game, you've got 2 dice in one. But if you're a teacher, you're trying to offer a way to get some quick math. The small dice times the large dice, the little dice divided by the big dice, roll on the table, and the colors, get multiplied, or the similar colors win. Anybody who rolls the same number, the inside number determines who wins, and you get a lot of these dice, and then you can make it a quick math tournament challenge and quickly start getting math reinforced to where you're not even thinking about it anymore. You're just playing the game. All right, so Jeff's asking, what would you use those dice for? I think those are some of the things that I've heard of using these dice. I personally just think they're super cool. They give you that extra rattle, so when you're playing, they just make the games more fun. But I really like the idea. I mean, I don't really have math challenges myself anymore, but I know that if I was teaching somebody, this is the kind of thing that adds an element of randomness to a math thing. So instead of looking at a bunch of math equations on a piece of paper, and each one is sequential. So, what's 3 times 5? What's 4 times 5? What's 5 times 5? Now there's some randomness to it and some challenge to not just memorize a pattern, but to, pay attention to what's happening. I don't know. I'm not a teacher, but that's why I see it. Dang, I forgot to add these to the mix too. I got to get used to doing this. This is one of my first, I'm still learning the live streams. These things are kind of neat. Essentially, they're star charts, or pictures of the night sky inside of a nightlight. So you plug this in. This is to aim it wherever onto like the ceiling or the wall or something. So depending on what the circumstances are, what the situation is, I've seen people use these just for photography and stuff to display an interesting pattern on the wall. But this particular one, the light travels or moves, a little disc moves between these 3 images. One of them's like a planet, one's the moon, and one's the solar system. And I think this one's just the solar system. You can get them in different things. You can get them with underwater scenes and stuff. They're essentially night lights, but they can be interesting and useful. I forgot to put them in the list, so that's another bonus. All right, next up is the weather deck. Big fan of this. I personally never learned weather when I was a kid, and I wish I would have. I think it's the kind of thing that's worth just knowing, so that it's not like weather's going to stop happening. And it's not like weather's different around the world. So once you know weather, it's like learning math. You have a common denominator with a lot of people. Every pilot you meet knows weather intimately. A lot of scientists and stuff understand weather. Any kind of biologist is going to understand, if not really understand weather. So learning that stuff young, I think, has got some benefits or some advantages. It's not, if you're just trying to have a more interesting road trip or a camping trip, what you've got here is an interesting deck of cards. It's a game, but it's also for learning. And as I kind of thumb through here, you see that there's different cards with different types of weather on them, but they also have different numbers and different colors associated with them. And that's because this is really the pieces for lots of different games. And this fold-out thing in the front here is a whole bunch of different games that they came up with, but because it's kind of a parts, it's a bunch of different elements here, it's designed to make your own game. And I think that's half the fun of this, is that it's about weather. It's focused on weather, but what it really is kind of a game construction kit. So if you're on a trip, or you just got somebody who learns creatively, I think this wild weather cards is an awesome one. A lot of these are really good values as well. We're not talking a lot to entertain and to teach here. So can't learn more than with the ball bearing, right? Jeff was saying, as a pilot and sailor, understanding weather is critical. I didn't even think about boating, but yeah, you're right. I mean, I live in Arizona, so getting on the water doesn't come to mind right off the bat, but great point. Jeff is saying, or no, Gizzard is saying he had a quarter course in meteorology. I don't know what that means, but a course in meteorology in high school. I only had some. I think we had it as part of class once, but it was just a portion of a physical science class or something. So I wish we would have learned a little bit more. And I didn't really pay attention with my weather merit badge if I even got it. Gizzard is also saying he went to, and Gizzard Gary does live chats, or he will be doing live chats. Check out his channel, Gear Report. is also here on Amazon. You can check out their channel. Thanks, guys, for checking in. So this is a ball bearing, and it's a ball bearing with a hole in it. Now, they sell these as pendulums. That's what they're designed for. I mean, it's super difficult to run a hole through a ball bearing, first off. So, I mean, if you think you can just buy a ball bearing and run a drill through it, that's difficult. But there's lots of things you can do with a ball bearing with a hole in it. Besides tying a decent string to it and just using it as pendulum, there's lots of things you can do with pendulums and sand, pendulums and magnets, right? But this thing with a line through it can, in a slingshot, it can be used to throw a line up into a tree, a line from a boat to a boat, throw something out into the middle of a lake and retrieve it. So I think that there's lots of potential fun you can have when you have a solid, other than like if you did this with like a couple of nuts or something and just tied them to the end of a string, they're not going to be as aerodynamic. They're not going to be as dense. So there's some advantage here. These are super economical, and it just accomplishes something you can't do at home, putting a hole in a ball bearing. And that simple element there just leads to a lot of projects and a lot of experiments, and it's a useful tool that no one's going to outgrow. Let's see, the next things that we have, that was the ball bearing. The next things we've got are more science related for projects and tests and things. But to learn, often we learn our stuff in school and then we never go home and apply it. So having some of these tools at home for homeschooling or just for additional interest in learning is useful. So we've got a couple of simple pulleys here. And these are made by, what was GSC? What does that stand for? It's like Go Science, Get Science Creative or something. It's like a pretty interesting company that's designed. It's a company that's based on bringing science tools and equipment, to make it possible to get tools and equipment for education-based play like this. So I dropped it, but we've got a couple of GSC pulleys, and pulleys are all about force and the simple machines and physics, right? Applying force and tension, all those things. So having a couple of double pulleys, single pulleys to create some kind of set. What do they call it? Set of pulleys. But to give you the ability with some string to learn about those forces. We got those in there. And then the other side of that, or to be able to measure that, an inexpensive yet useful spring balance that can be quickly adjusted, no batteries or anything. And again, to show how the spring consistently moves and is used to measure the force applied. And once you start removing and adding pulleys to the mix, measuring it yourself, that's where you start to understand those simple mechanisms that let us move on. And again, so much of this, I don't know how many people are thinking about it, but how much of this is related to computer logic. These same forces apply if it's electrons or string. So you start to learn these basic things and it starts to add on. So that was the spring balance. In addition, I can't recommend enough these inexpensive digital calipers. When I was a kid, calipers were kind of high-end tools and no one had extras laying around. And if you wanted to measure something, you had to do it with a ruler or whatever. The calipers were just expensive and they were metal and they were like made in Germany or something. So this is a very economical, very obtainable digital caliper. My battery's dead, but it took 2 years for the battery to go dead, and the battery's right here. I just forgot to go to the store and get one before the video. But essentially, it just works. If you ruin it, it's not very expensive. Giving a kid their own tools, having something like this so they can accurately measure, and it does a great job of accurately measuring the outside diameter of things, even if they're round, and the inside diameter of things, even if they're fairly small or fairly large. So really cool tool. Giving a kid a digital caliper as a youngin is going to really open their understanding and just something that we never had, or very few, I think, had in past generations. So very cool piece of tech. I finally found the chicken pox giant amoeba in the list, or highlighting it. And right after the chicken pox, let's pull up a banana. So this is Bananagrams, a pretty fun game. It's essentially like a kid's version of a Scrabble, except it's a little easier and a little more kid friendly. So it's in a green banana pouch. And as you can see, lots of decent tiles. The instructions on how to play, can play it a couple of different ways. And unlike Scrabble, there's just a couple of things that are different. They put some of the word sets to get letter sets together to kind of, again, give you some more creativity with the game. But again, if you're going to play anyway, might as well play with words and start to learn language. Oh, I forgot to highlight that one. Going back to a more outside the box education, and then just your standard books and whatnot. This is it's called Wild Cards, and it's a deck of cards. But instead of being just playing cards, these are playing cards with information about edible plants that are out there. They give you a map with the region in both the United States and Canada, so I guess it's international. They also give you some drawings here on the side of what the plant's going to look like, kind of in ideal conditions. And then you get a full color image of the plant. Most of these are plants, some of them are flowers, probably a couple of nuts in here. And then on the back, of course, you've got all kinds of information. So there are playing cards, there are the suits here on both sides, so you can play it like a regular deck of cards. But really, the idea here is to have it with you if you're camping, if you're on a road trip, if you're just going out to do some nature identification instead of only having a book. Now you've got these cards for learning and for just keeping the brain going. Instead of having to memorize a page in a book, now maybe you start to associate the different plants or whatever, maybe with the suits, but maybe you just start to associate them differently. Now, one of the neat things about this deck is it does come with a ball chain. So there's holes already drilled in this deck. This is the second thing that we have listed that has a hole drilled in it. And that allows you to tether all the cards together with that ball chain, or a string or something. And again, have the ability to use these instead of just having them with you on the trip. Have them in your pocket and use them. You're not going to lose them. And again, very economical way to bring information with you when you're out walking. So often we see something and we go, "Oh, is that mint?" Well, I don't know. I'm not going to eat it because I'm scared. Well, know if it's mint or not. All right. So the next one. Oh, Gizzard is saying that a quarter course was a half a semester. We could enroll in quarter courses sometimes. I'm trying to remember. I think now that you say that, maybe we did have something like that. All right, the next thing in our list is going to be a soft tape measure. It's kind of a boring little thing, but I had it sitting here and I was thinking that one of the things that I had growing up, and I think it's a good idea, is these little soft, I think they're for seamstresses or whatever, right? For measuring clothes mostly, or, dimensions of something that's odd shape, like a human body. But these flexible tape measures almost always, like if you look at this table here, this isn't exactly the best idea because this is rock. But if this was the side of a table, almost every workspace that my grandfather had, he'd have one of these tape measures, or often it was his metal tape measures that were broken or something. He'd have a tape measure though, maybe 6 inches, 12 inches, 18 inches, however long, just on the front of the table. And then no matter what it was, you could just, imagine if this tape measure was permanently stapled or glued here, and it was just always there, then you could always just bring this over and go, okay, if you bring it to the end, no problem, it's 10 inches. But even if you bring it over here and you start at 5 and you go over to 14, you know how long that is, right? So it's just a useful little tip. And since I had it, I don't know if it's necessarily a learning thing, but I got to assume that if you've kind of got the measurements there in front of you, easy to get to effortlessly, you're going to start to just be able to conceptualize how long things are, how big things are, better than if you didn't have that there. So that's why I threw it in the list. Similar, we're talking about a ruler, talking about measuring. That's what this little guy is. So this is designed, I'm going to go grab it. Ruler. This is designed to take either a yardstick, like this is a whole big yardstick, or a regular ruler, and they're all kind of this standard size. And I'm not going to be able to get this one on because it's an old one, but you get this thing through, and when it gets to the middle, it'll balance. And this way, you've got a good, sturdy balance. Now you can set strings or rubber bands or something over here, and you can do all kinds of different math stuff where you have the increments on your measuring device that's improvised. You've got a good attachment point that's got no friction at all, and you can adjust it to exact middle of your balance and then tighten it, and then either leave that permanently or just always pull this thing off and store this thing in a drawer separate. But this little gizmo takes away all the effort from using a wooden ruler as a fulcrum or as a scale. Pretty handy, and again, not a big burden on the pocketbook. Another, I think, useful tool when learning physics, when learning along with the spring balance, along with pulleys. Sometimes you want to put a load, right? Some kind of weight on the end. So if you don't have a lot of place to do that, or it's just not safe to do it, one of the things you can do is have one of these frictionless chassis. What do they call it? A frictionless platform. And essentially, these have been around for a long, long time. They give you a sturdy, rigid compartment to put either weights or whatever into. And then these spools, these wheels are aluminum. They've got almost no friction. And they also are designed to just go in a straight line. So if you've got a few of them, you can buy these in sets of 10. When you've got a few of them and you're maybe putting them next to each other on a table or on the ground or something, they don't have any tendency to go off course. They're designed to kind of pull in a single direction with almost no friction and allow your experiment to be the focus of what you're doing and not building a lot of apparatus. So it's kind of a simple thing, and depending on where somebody's at with learning and with physics and that, or how much experimentation or how many labs you're doing, having one or even more of these might be useful. And I think that's it. So I missed a couple of things I was going to put in here. I got this IQ test that's pretty cool for kind of breaking things up. And I had a couple other decks of cards here, but evidently I forgot to put them in with the Amazon stuff. So we'll wrap this thing up by kind of going back through, taking a look at some of that stuff. We had some of these physics experiments things, some of the physical science experimental tools of the trade with the pulleys and the measurement devices, the calipers and the measuring tape. I didn't have any thermometers in here, but those are always a good idea. Most of science is observation and understanding through measurement, minor differences or comparisons. The little ball bearing, often overlooked, but a really useful multi-use item for education. These wild weather cards. Again, I really think those things are great when you're young and to get that kind of basics down. These dice inside of a dice, lots of different numbers of these you can get. I recommend getting a bunch so you can play some war games with them. You can't lose them if you have 72. At least you can't lose all of them. I won't be able to pull everything back up here, but I do think the periodic table puzzle is a pretty cool, not only activity to learn the elements while you're putting it together, but then your end result is a pretty nice presentation, a big periodic table poster, essentially. We've got the Turtles programming game. Got that amoeba sitting right there. We talked about the ball maze. It's kind of a Legos meets the mousetrap game, but reality, I think you'll learn a lot of stuff about, or at least potentially can learn a lot of stuff about logic and electronics when you think about the ball bearings being the flow of electrons through conductors and using the maze to set up, again, different logic channels and logic paths. We've got the, I guess I have all this stuff stacked now. We've got the giant molecule sets, though, great for learning chemistry and putting it not just into 3 dimensions, but once you have to assemble your own, you start to see where the double bonds are versus the single bonds. And you start to, like, for example, when I was putting this together, you see these on paper so often, and you don't think about how they're twisted, how they're in 3 dimensions, and it's really difficult to show that on paper. And that's where these models can show you that, it's not possible for that red guy and this blue guy to touch just because of the forces at play here. Anyway, so that's those models are really neat, especially if somebody's struggling. I think seeing it, at least for me, seeing something from a different direction helps me conceptualize it. We have the counting bits, the plastic counting blocks. We have the small skulls, and then the giant 4-foot skeleton puzzle, floor puzzle. And then the first thing we looked at was that Bloxel video game, where you played the game by having some fun putting together different bits or blocks of data, and then you take those pictures and you apply them to the app, and then you animate them and you create a video game. Let's see, Mike on the YouTube side is saying, when you make learning fun, kids learn faster and retain what they learn, and those things look fun, so they will learn. Exactly, and that's what our experience is. The kids aren't going to play with this stuff like their favorite toy, but if you're getting elements of learning across as you're learning these games and having fun with them, that's the whole point. So I hope that we've offered some good tips as we get back into the school season, some things for different aged learners, and feel free to leave us some comments. Thanks for everybody who's given us hearts and follows us over on the Amazon or here on the other platforms. We're going to end the stream over on Amazon. Thanks to Gizzard Gary, who is also does live chats over here, and Gear Report, who does live chats on Amazon as well. Appreciate your feedback and that stream. So that one's ending, and I'll say thanks to the people who joined us over here on YouTube. We start this one first, we end this one after. So if there's any other questions or anything, different rules over here than there are on Amazon. You don't get to see on Amazon. I get to flip around the stuff on the screen. So not so much on the screen, but like next to the screen, I get to flip around the different items that we were looking at. So you kind of miss out on that. But I do appreciate your feedback over here. I'll leave you with a commercial for our Gear website store. If you're interested in grabbing something from over there, we do appreciate it. It's how we help keep the lights on. And that's always a challenge, right? All right, so Gizzard is over here. Thanks again for helping out, man. I really appreciate the interactivity. As you know, we're learning this thing, so I'm sure that the interactivity helps with the, what do you call them, logarithms over there. All right, have a great day, everybody. We'll be back after a while tonight on the big channel to look back at some of our flashback stuff, and then Gizzard is live tomorrow over on, here on YouTube. All right, thanks, everybody. GearWebsites.com is your source for firearms-based playing cards and books. We also have mugs, shirts, and posters with designs that we've made live. Of course, we have patches. Every Friday is Free Patch Friday. We appreciate your support. Thank you for shopping at GearWebsites.com.